Sadistic Penguin Studios presents the At the Show podcast with Tom Yumper Garcia.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn, call the president.
And Tony Chalsa Burt.
I don't know this industry jargon, YP, MP, whatever, okay? All I know is that I cannot get a record contract. We cannot get a record contract unless I take these tapes.
It's almost time, so grab a drink, get your popcorn ready, and join the film discussion with two guys from Chicago talking movies.
Welcome to a new episode of the At the Show podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Tom Yumper Garcia, and I'm with my other co-host, Tony Chalsa Burt. Mr. Burt, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, my man. How are you?
I am good. I am completely happy that it's a long weekend. I am happy to be off work. I'm just really excited to talk The Godfather today.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of good times here. I promise you.
For sure, my friend, for sure. Before we get started, just wanted to, address the elephant in the room. As you can see, we have rebranded our show into At the Show. Swole decided he didn't want to do the podcast anymore, so no hard feelings. It just, the show must go on, and we thank him for all his contributions. And he started this thing with me 2 years ago, and he's still, I would say, a good friend. So I would say, good luck to him, and just want to keep talking movies, man. And who better than Tony Burt? I mean, I talked to you about movies like when I first met you, and we've always talked movies all the time, even when I was in the show. So
I was thinking about this today. If somebody was to go and look 2 years on New Year's Eve on your account of the day, you'll see me thanking you for talking movies. So it's crazy. 2 years later, almost to the day, here we are again talking movies. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. And again, I appreciate being part of this. So thank you.
For sure, man. For sure. Always good to have you. You're a good dude. We have different conflicting things on movies as well, but we also align a lot of things. So I'm really excited to see what we can do, man.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Let's rock.
Yes, for sure. But let's get into our first segment, Mr. Burt, with what we've been watching.
That's a me. And also, what were you just watching?
So, Mr. Burt, what have you been watching?
Oh, I've been watching a couple different things. For the show, I have watched There Will Be Blood, which I hadn't watched in a while, and I wanted to bring it back to the fold in my life, so I decided to watch it. And I didn't watch it once. I watched it quite a few times, and I am now more into Daniel Day-Lewis than I have been in a long, long time. Just a great all-around movie. I think it fits in really well with, again, like a movie like The Godfather, excellently shot, excellently acted, excellent script, excellent music, just excellent all around movie. The other movie that I watched, and I watched it for a second time today during the snowstorm, and it was another movie that just really blew me away. I laughed. Not gonna lie, there were a few tears. The Holdovers, Paul Giamatti, he's up for lots of awards for this movie. Directed by Alexander Payne. If you've ever seen Sideways with Giamatti or Election, which he directed, definitely worth views. Yes. How about you, my man? What have you been watching?
So this week, actually, since I last been on, me and the wife really got into the Reacher show. We went through the first season, loved it on Prime, and then we're actually watching the second season as it gets released. So today was another episode that was released, and we'll watch that after this show today. Really like it. I'm a big fan of true crime and stuff like that, and murder mysteries and stuff. I was a huge Law and Order fan back in the day. I know I'm a geek, but that was something I was super into. The original Law and Order with Lenny Briscoe.
Oh yeah, that's a great show.
Yeah, so this is like right up my alley. I love the movies, and I actually really enjoy the show. The show's actually very entertaining and quite comical. So if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend you check that one out. Another thing I watched was Leave the World Behind, which is a Netflix film with Julia Roberts in it and Ethan Hawke. Uh, so this movie, it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great either, in my opinion.
Well, let's get started with our movie, relationship here. I'm glad you said it like that because I didn't know what I was gonna say if you said it was great. So I'm glad that you put it that way because that's pretty much how I felt too. So go on more on what you were going
Yeah, so,
through.
I mean, my wife and I watched it. I love the idea of it. I think, it had a good idea, but I think some of the characters are kinda wasted, and I think, there's a lot of times where the characters are just standing around. There's no real development, and there's no real to me, like, real true ending
Yeah.
to where it all comes together. It's basically about, the world is based well, the United States is basically under attack, and everything is getting shut out. I don't wanna go into too much details if you haven't seen it, but it's something that, like, it's kinda dystopian, and I thought it could have been done a lot better. When the movie started off, I liked it, and then as it gradually started going into the film, I'm like, and then even, I was like, "Well, maybe it's just me," and my wife was telling me, "Yeah, it's just not making a lot, it was really not that great." Um, and then when I was reading the forums and whatnot, people said the book's even worse. So I'm
Oh,
like, I was like, "Geez." But I mean, I gave it a shot. It was okay.
yeah. I mean, I was a little disappointed because I'm a fan of Sam Esmail. I watched Mr. Robot. I thought Mr.
Mhm,
Robot was really, really done well. So, and I had heard lots of positivity about this movie. So I was ready to jump right in and be taken over. And I was exactly like you. There was a little too many slow parts. But again, I'm a big Julia Roberts fan,
mhm.
Ethan Hawke, Marshall. Just seeing them, it's worth the view, like you said, checking it out.
Yeah, and I think Ethan Hawke, like, is one of those people who, like, kinda had that resurgence in his career. He did The Black, Phone, and
Yeah.
apparently he's gonna be in the sequel. He's always been a decent actor, but now, Sinister, and now
Yeah.
he's, with The Black Phone, and now he's getting kinda like a little resurgence here with Netflix movies, and that's kinda good to see from him because I think he's, talented. So,
Very, very talented.
I look forward to, what he brings next. I mean, if it's a Netflix movie, if you have Netflix, check it out and let us know what you think, but it just wasn't for me.
Definitely agree. Definitely agree.
Yeah, man. So let's get into what we're gonna talk about today. So we are discussing a deep dive into The Godfather. So as we have explained before, well, I have. I know Tony has put his love on Twitter or X. I don't know what it's called now. The fact that we're huge fans of The Godfather. My brother-in-law is one like the people when I already see him, we discuss Godfather quotes. We talk Godfather. He's a huge Godfather fan. It's one of the first movies I saw as a kid. We had the big VHS box set of The Godfather that was 2 cassettes because the movie was so long. It was a movie that really got me into film in terms of watching it and just seeing masterful performances. It's a movie that is constantly praised today as probably one of the greatest movies ever made. That's varying to opinion, but I'm really excited to talk about this one. What about you, Tom?
I'm right with you. I actually earlier today was explaining to my wife how I remember specifically seventh, eighth grade getting that double cassette that you're talking about for Christmas, part one and part two, and just how cool it was having two cassettes. And that was when I started my movie collections, those VHSs, the ones that had the two cassettes, I thought were like the cooler movies, your Godfathers, your Deer Hunters, your stuff like that. But jumping into this movie today, I'm very, very excited. So many different things rewatching it again that I've noticed that I'm excited to talk about today. So this is going to be really awesome.
Yeah, so the way we're gonna run this is it's gonna be a little different from the previous shows that I have done before. We have a whole different format for this. So we're gonna have 3 segment breakdowns for The Godfather. The first is gonna deal with the development of The Godfather, meaning how it all came together before the actual film. That's gonna be our second part, which is a film breakdown. And then lastly, we're gonna go into the critical reception of the film, along with some crazy fan theories that are out there and some other fun stuff in there. So with that, Mr. Burt, are you ready to get into this?
Let's do it.
So let's get into the development.
thoughts, I use the technique of positive visualization.
The Godfather is based on a 1969 novel of the same name by Mario Puzo. Puzo claimed that all the experiences in the book are not from personal experiences, but research that he's done on organized crime. Although he does say that some aspects of the characters are from his family, whether it be Vito Corleone's personality, who he based off his mother, or even the part where they're hiding guns throughout the household. He said a lot of families in New York that were connected to the mob did that, so it was kind of a normal thing of going on. He also based a lot of the stories and tribulations of Joe Profaci and Vito Genovese of the crime families from New York. So a lot of that is actually thrown into the story. So with that, he wrote the book due to trying to appeal to the masses. He needed money at the time. He was in gambling debt, which is kind of funny because he owed money to bookies. So he ended up selling this book to Paramount, the rights to it, for $10,000, and some say it was 12K. There's varying degrees, and an option for $80,000 on the back end if it was made into a film. His agent told him, "Don't take this deal." But he was so desperate for money, he took it right away. He eventually got hooked up with Coppola, and the rest is history. But there were several people interested in adapting this film. Paramount's VP of production, Peter Bart, had a scout out there that actually saw the book. And since the book was on the bestsellers list for 67 weeks, was really pumped to try to get this over into a movie. Now, Paramount had an issue where it actually had a film that was supposedly Italian based that starred Kirk Russell and the non-Italian actor Martin Ritt called The Brotherhood. That movie bombed. So Bart was a little hesitant about taking on another Italian movie, but when his scout told him just do it, he decided to take a chance on it, and eventually they picked up the rights to The Godfather. It's just crazy how this guy had, gambling debts, man, just to even write the book, just to get money out for profit.
I often think a lot of times, anybody can sit down, it just takes that focus to write a book. And then you put on top of it all those things that you're saying that's going on in the background while he's writing this book, very, very, very awesome. I remember first seeing the book, and for some reason, before I even knew what it was about, just seeing that hand on the front with the now I know it's a puppet thing, but when I was seeing it for the first time, I don't know what the heck he was holding. I was like, is that just a square? But now I know exactly what.
Yeah, same thing. I always wonder, like, why is it? But now I get the deeper meaning of him being the pulling the strings behind.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
But several people were interested in making the movie, including Burt Lancaster and Danny Thomas. When Paramount got the rights, their step was they wanted to find a director. But the first thing they did was they hired Albert Ruddy as the official film producer because he gave an outstanding interview for the job. And also he was known within the industry, at least at Paramount, of getting films to be way under budget. So you can kind of see that Paramount did not have a lot of faith in this film going forward. They first offered the director's role to the legendary director, Sergio Leone, who turned it down. And we all know Leone would go on to direct another classic in 1984's Once Upon a Time in America.
Being a big fan of Leone, I don't know if he would have been able to do as well. We never know, but Coppola definitely did a good job.
I think it's kind of. I mean, we can get to it like at the end when we do but I think it's kind of like apples and oranges. I think Once Upon a Time in America is very good. I'm a huge fan of the spaghetti westerns that Leone did. All the Clint Eastwood, Fistful of Dollars, Man with No Name, Outlaw Josie Whale. Those films are they're really meaningful to me. So
Once Upon a Time in the West is one of my
yes.
favorite westerns of all time. So I love the man. So it's always that when you see it in one way, the other way you're imagining it up in your head, and it could be awesome. It could even be better. We'll never know, but it's cool to even hear that was a suggestion. To even put that on the table.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And along with Leone, when he turned down the role, several other directors were offered a role, from Peter Yates to Richard Brooks to Arthur Penn to Francis J. Schaeffer, who was also just came off the directing of Patton, to Costa Javaris to even Otto Preminger, and they all declined, which I think is pretty crazy.
Because those are all, great directors to a degree, and that's why it's crazy that looking back, I would like to have heard the interviews after the fact when they seen it, how they felt. Like, would they have still passed? Would they have brought something different? That's always what's cool to think about too.
Yeah, it's always like that, that what ifs. I mean, we do it a lot in sports, and it turns out we do it a lot in a lot of things, and, like, in movies, it's no different than that, what if this person took this role and we can automatically think about that and, like, wonder, like, how would it have came out? Um, Paramount executive Robert Evans actually was one of the people that was a forefront behind the making of this movie. He wanted to cast a Italian director, like I said, because it's a failure of The Brotherhood where there was no Italian actors or directors. He wanted to make this as close to authentic as possible in terms of having Italians characters played by Italians. They eventually settled upon this rising director by the name of Francis Ford Coppola, who took this job just so he can keep his production studio, American Zoetrope, in business. His production company owed more than $400,000 to Warner Brothers due to the over budget of the THX 1138 film. Now, I know you're a huge fan of this film, Tony. So, was it really worth the overruns?
Oh,
Uh,
I'll never. I'll put it this way. I'll always remember asking before I'd even seen it. I asked my dad. I was like, "What is this movie THX 1138?" He's a big sci-fi guy. He's like, "It's crap," and that's all I remember. But no, I don't think it was worth the over budget of that film. No.
It's pretty crazy. But Coppola agreed to get $125,000 for pay and 6% of the gross rentals. However, Evans, knowing that Coppola was still a younger director, hired Elia Kazan to take over directing from the film because he felt he didn't know if Coppola could handle the production that was so big. Also, they had a film editor by the name of Aaron Avakian. And why are these people important? Well, these two people, along with 12 other staff, Coppola believed was actually trying to sabotage his filming. They pushed back on a lot of things. They were not liking the way he was filming things in terms of the way he was screen testing. So they would report back to the studio, and he got pissed, and Coppola ended up firing them, which I think is pretty hilarious that he's just like, well, you're going to have enemies. I'll just fire you. So that just shows like Coppola give no fucks about what was going on.
It's that, it's just like a cool time in filmmaking too, it's like and when you're watching this movie, it doesn't feel like that's what went on in the background to get this made. It feels like it's the most pristine production. Everything went smoothly. They knew who they wanted. But it really wasn't like that at the beginning.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. He even risked like compromising the final form of the film because he wanted to keep most of the money coming to his production studios because he was so far in debt with it and to keep it afloat that he made them do the post production at his company instead of where they would usually do it in Hollywood. He also changed the script in terms of the way it was written. It was more written in 1970s. And he's like, no, that's too cheap. I want to go back to the time it was set in, which raised the budget from 2.5 million to 6 million. He also reached out to Puzo and had Puzo actually write the script with him. Now they had conflicting notes to where Puzo would write his script part of the script and Coppola would read the book, the actual novel, and write his script, and they would just kind of mesh them together. But it became such a great working relationship, even though they had their disagreements, was that the reason it's called Mario Puzo's The Godfather is because of Coppola, because Coppola said he wrote the script for it. He should get credit for the name as well, which I think is pretty awesome that he actually did that.
Yeah, that's very awesome. And again, something that you don't see very often anymore.
Yeah, and just like the whole concept of the film, Coppola wanted the film to be more about a family chronicle instead of organized crime. And I think he kind of pushed that through the film. I mean, we can get to it later, but it's just kind of crazy how the development of Coppola himself, getting in the role, taking reasons he took the role, and I kind of see a pattern here. The writer needed money, so he for one, wrote the book and then took the first money he got to pay off his debts. Coppola, so it looks like, took the role because he needed money to pay off his debt. So you got two people in debt taking a role to make this masterpiece of a film, which I think is pretty crazy.
And generally, people in debt don't turn gold. It turns into, a bad situation where
Mhm.
you're a woman, so it's cool that they were able to take this misfortune and spin it into, film gold.
Yeah, and as we have Coppola on board, we actually go into the casting. So Coppola's choices for his roles were looked at as really unorthodox by the studio. They thought he was a young, hot shot director. They didn't think he had any direction. But Coppola was always strange in his ways. Even in his roles he did like later in his life, he refused to cast his own sister Talia Shire for the role of Connie, even though she had an audition, which I think is pretty crazy because his casting director, Fred Roos, actually cast her, and Coppola's like, "No, for one, she's too good looking, and two, I don't want nepotism to show up in my films," which is kind of funny.
That is.
Um, but Puzo actually is the reason that Talia Shire is actually in this film because he pushed for her to be Connie, which I think is pretty cool when you have the writer of the book saying, "No, this person can do it."
Yeah, that was, something when doing research that, I didn't even know, which I thought was cool. That here I
Mhm.
thought this whole time that was the reason she was in it was because, and then when doing research for the show, no, it was he didn't want her in it at all, which actually makes while watching the movie and the performance, I think even much more stronger myself.
Mailman Jack says, "I have a confession. I found my dad's copy of the book, The Godfather, as a young Jack, and read it thinking it was dirty because it was in his private stuff. Good book, not dirty."
I would. That's great. That's a
Yeah,
great
it's great.
story.
It's hilarious, Jack. Um, so Rue, who was the casting director, and Coppola came together, and like I said, they wanted to keep it as authentic as possible. They wanted to cast as many Italian actors as possible. And at first, they ruled out James Caan as Sonny, even though he was Coppola's favorite. Coppola's like, well, maybe I should go with more Italian actors for the role. Uh, he did, however, want Tom Hagen to be played by the great Robert Duvall, who was cast. Marlon Brando was of three actors considered for Don Corleone, including George C. Scott from Patton and Lawrence Oliver. Oliver was a little too ill to take the role, even though he wasn't Coppola's first choice, but Coppola would have been okay with it. George C. Scott, I can't see him playing Vito Corleone.
Again, I mentally imagined all these people playing this role, and I wasn't getting, and I liked them in other roles, so it wasn't like I don't know them in other roles. They're just, I think, I just think
It would have been a
it wouldn't have
disaster.
worked. It would have
And I
been, it
like
would have
George
been
C.
bad,
Scott.
you
George C.
know.
Scott does a great job in The Exorcist 3 if you haven't seen that. It's a very good
Oh yes, yes,
little
really,
gem.
really good. Really quick before you move on, do
Mm.
you think somebody like a Daniel Day-Lewis could have played Vito? Like, could he have gone to that role?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think,
What?
so I can get into more of Brando. So with
Yeah, go on.
Brando, he's the father of method acting.
Yeah.
And I found that really strange and interesting that Brando actually was hesitant to take the role, not because he didn't like the script, but because he never played an Italian character before, and he didn't know how to actually portray it correctly and wanted to give it, his best to do so. He was being, recruited by Puzo. Puzo sent him a letter and talked to him about the role before he even did the casting, which I thought was crazy. Um, and like I said, he was just very, very hesitant of doing it. He had some, Brando's known for his erratic behavior, and then his previous movies were flops. So he was like, I don't know if I want to do it. The studio was totally against casting him. Um, to the point that when Coppola brought up Brando at a Paramount meeting, a Paramount executive told him, Brando will never appear in the picture and to never bring it up again. And when Coppola heard this, he went and pretended he had an epileptic fit on the floor to make it sound make it be as ridiculous as possible to show this executive like you're an idiot. Like it's just ridiculous that you don't want to have this actor in here. And the studio was actually pushing for Charles Bronson as
Oh,
Don Corleone. Even Orson Welles was actually publicly advocating for this job as the Don. He even said he would lose weight for it, which I thought was pretty crazy. And then another character person they actually had in mind was Anthony Quinn, who I could see doing it. If you haven't seen the movie Gotti, the HBO version with Amara Sante, he does a great job as Leo de la Croce. Nino de la Croce. He does a great job as him in that movie. Great, role. Also a Latino actor who did, who's known for playing other characters, which I thought I could have seen it. I don't know if it would have done a Brando job, but that would have been kind of interesting.
Yeah,
What do you think?
he's a good actor. Really good actor.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, that's the thing with Brando. So, when they eventually said, "Okay, we'll give you Brando, but he has to meet 3 criteria." The first was Brando would do the film for nothing. The second being that Coppola would personally post a bond to insure them against any shenanigans causing overage, meaning that if Brando decided he was going to walk off the set and be Marlon Brando, not show up and be Marlon Brando, they're like, you're going to pay for the overages as we do, which I think is pretty crazy considering that Coppola was already in debt, that he said, okay. Coppola's final thing he had to do was make the great Marlon Brando do a screen test. Coppola, being Coppola, said he'll do all of it. And this is without even knowing Marlon Brando, which shows that, again, Coppola has a lot of balls when going back with Paramount. And everybody pretty much kind of knows that Paramount and Coppola did not have a good relationship during this movie. And it's a lot of pushback and a lot of, going back in between them two. Coppola shot Brando with Kleenex in his mouth and shoe polish in his hair as Don Corleone for a screen test. And as they say, the rest is history. So I think it's pretty funny that they gave these 3 things to do for Brando. They said, you're not going to make any money, which eventually came out that Brando earned $1.6 million from a net participation deal for the role in the film. And I found this really, really, crazy, Tony. The fact that Marlon Brando is the father of method acting. He always did his roles cold. He never memorized his lines. There's pictures of Robert Duvall with Marlon Brando's lines taped to him as he reads them. And that's just, he said that it's better. His reasoning was that as an actor, the best way you're gonna get a better, more authentic performance is if you just do it cold for the first time.
I would have to say that, sometimes that's even with this right now, sometimes just coming up with something like that, you can see the sporadically in his acting how great he did. So I could agree with that for him. Definitely.
It's just crazy, but I mean, not everybody's Marlon Brando either.
No, not everybody can do that either. To not be able to remember your lines, but to know what you need to do to get the scene and what you need in the role.
Definitely.
But at this point coming along, he had been, in so many awesome roles that by this point, he should have just been able to do exactly what he did, which was awesome that he did it without getting, as they said, he was going to not do it.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Al Martino, who was known as playing Johnny Fontaine, was actually a real famed nightclub singer. He was cast by Ruddy, the producer. After hearing about the part from a friend, Coppola did not like that Ruddy cast him and fired him right away. And this is another interesting part. He gave it to Vic Damone. Now, for those who are fans of the movie Money Talks, Vic Damone plays a big role in that movie as the fictional father of Chris Tucker's character that he claims is his dad with Paul. What's Paul's last name? He's from Sorvino, Paul Sorvino. Yeah, which is hilarious. But it's just funny that Vic Damone was offered the role. But Martino has some mob ties, and this comes full circle now, knowing the Irishman, because he went to his real life godfather, Russell Buffalino, and told him, hey, I was hired for this role. They didn't give it to me. They gave it to me, they took it away, and I need your help. And Buffalino proceeded to orchestrate publications in the media claiming that Coppola was unaware of Ruddy giving him the role. Eventually, Vic Damone saw the pressure and dropped out, and the role was given back to Martino. But not apparently before he was threatened by Frank Sinatra, because according to Mario Puzo, the character Johnny Fontaine isn't really based on Sinatra. However, it's widely assumed that it is, and Sinatra was pissed off about it to the point where he met Puzo at a restaurant and was yelling at him and threatening him. Sinatra was so opposed to the movie that were fearing of the backlash of it, and they cut a lot of Johnny Fontaine's roles down, his scenes down to minimal. And in the book, it's totally. I mean, we can get to the difference in the book later, but Fontaine plays a little higher, stronger role than he would in the movie. And I think that's pretty crazy that Frank Sinatra went out of his way to do so. Also, it's also known that Martino wasn't a great actor, so that probably could have had a lot to do with it.
Good man.
But it's pretty crazy that Frank Sinatra is getting pissed that you based a lounge singer off him, which is pretty funny. And as we move down the cast, Coppola cast Diane Keaton for the role of Kay Adams, due to the fact that her reputation was being an erratic and eccentric actress, which I think is pretty crazy. John Calazzari was given the part of Fredo Corleone after Coppola saw him perform in an off-way Broadway production, which he loved, and he brought it to his producer with him, and his producer brought it to Robert Evans and told him, "Hey, this is our Fredo. You have to hire this man." And as we get more and more into this cast, we go back to the organized crime aspect, as Gianna Russo was given the role of Carlo Rizzi after he was asked to perform a screen test for the role, in which he acted out a fight between Rizzi and Connie. Russo used his organized crime connections to secure the role of Carlo Rizzi, going as so far to get a camera crew to film his own audition and send it to the producers, which I think is kind of crazy. But Marlon Brando, being Marlon Brando, was like, "No, I don't want this guy in my film. He never acted before." And the best part is, this made Russo furious to the point that he went and told Brando if he takes this role away from him, he will beat the living hell out of him and eat his heart. To the point where Brando thought he was in character and was like, "Oh my God, this is great. Like, hell yes, you could be in this movie." And Rizzo's like dumbfounded, like, "What?" But it's kind of funny that you were really threatened by a mob guy and you thought he was acting, but it was so authentic that you're like, "Yeah, he can act."
Yeah, he's good. He's good.
Which just shows how Marlon Brando sometimes was not the on this plane all the time of what was going on in the world. He was in his own little world.
No, he wasn't, was he?
And of course,
again, but as you stated, that's what made Marlon Brando, I think, perfect for the role.
Oh, definitely. And as we all know, one of the roles that was the hardest to cast for Coppola was that of Michael Corleone. Coppola always wanted Al Pacino for the role, and he felt after reading the book, he saw Pacino in the role. The studio, however, gave a lot of pushback against Pacino. One of the reasons being they thought of him as a stage actor, and he only had one film at this time called Panic in the Needle Park. Pacino was also small. They didn't like that, to the point where the studio actually pushed James Caan to even audition for the role of Michael. The studio also wanted other actors such as Dustin Hoffman, Martin Sheen, Dean Stockwell. Jack Nicholson was actually offered the role and turned it down because he felt it was a better role for an Italian actor. And eventually down the road, when the movie was made, Jack basically came out and said nobody could do it but Al. And this one cracked me up the most because Burt Reynolds was offered this role of Michael Corleone, but Brando threatened to quit if he was hired because Brando said that guy's a television actor, does not belong in films. And the best part is, when I was reading and researching this, was Burt Reynolds' response to this was, "I am just flattered he even thought of me." That was great.
That's really good.
So, Reynolds did not care. He's just fanboying out the fact that Marlon Brando knew who he was, which I think is hilarious. Pacino would undergo a series of screen tests for the role and no luck. The studio executives called him the Runt due to his size. It got so hectic to the point that Jill Clayburgh, who was actually dating Pacino at the time, would call Coppola and berate him, saying, "You're stringling Al along, like you're making him do all these screen tests and nothing's happening." Coppola, however, kept going to bat for him. And when Coppola actually went overseas to meet Brando to discuss the film, the studio executives happened to see Panic in Needle Park and were like, "Damn, Al Pacino can act." So they're like, "We'll cast him, but we want James Caan to be Sonny." Although Coppola thought Caan was his first choice, he gave a little pushback. Then he thought, you know what? That'll be pretty cool. So he was happy that he got Pacino. But the funny thing is that Pacino was thinking about he's going to lose his role. So he went and actually committed to an MGM film. Now, there's conflicting reports between it being Bang the Drum Slowly or He Who Can't Shoot. There's different movies, but it is said that he was already contracted for these films. Robert Evans, the executive from Paramount, had to call one of his close friends, Sidney Korshak, I'm sorry, a Chicago lawyer with connections to unions and big business to get him out of the contract. So this film, just in the making of it, like the getting everything together, has some organized crime ties from actors to calling in the sleazy lawyer, which I thought was hilarious. With this, the role that he turned down, that Pacino had turned down to take this film in The Godfather, was actually offered to another iconic actor and director, Robert De Niro, who was actually cast as the role of Paulie Gatto. Even though he auditioned for Michael, they gave him Paulie Gatto. But when Pacino left MGM, he asked if he could take that role over Paulie Gatto, which was given the blessing by Coppola. As you know, Coppola cast him in the sequel, and Johnny Martino was giving his role. It's just crazy how everything came full circle, that one left and the other one took over. So it worked out for both of them. A young Sylvester Stallone auditioned for the roles of Paulie Gatto and Carlo Rizzi, but was not cast for either, which I think is kind of funny.
That would have been great.
And, you know, John Martino, who plays Paulie, did his ad-lib words of Madone, and he was actually a perfect cast for such a minor character in the movie. What do you think about Johnny Martino's role?
I think it's, it fits exactly, what's called for in the movie, and I think he plays it perfectly. How about you?
Totally. I think it's for a small role, he plays it perfectly. And yes, Brian, that would have been crazy if he was cast as Carlo, because then he would have to beat up Adrian. So maybe Rocky would have never happened. For this role, for the roles in the movie, Pacino, Keaton, and Caan made $35,000, while Robert Duvall made $36,000. And to close out the casting aspect so far, the one and only Elvis Presley, whose favorite wrestler was Hulk Hogan, was an avid fan of the film, and he auditioned for the role of Tom Hagen, even though he really wanted to play Don Corleone.
Oh, man.
So can you see Elvis as Don Corleone?
Oh, man. Oh, well, maybe it could have made him a whole different career. Maybe this was something, he would just become a great actor and we would know him for that. No, I do not see him, though, ever as Corleone, and this movie is ruined, I think, if that's him.
I can just imagine him like combing his hair.
Oh, yeah.
Sticking his hips just for the role.
Singing songs in between, scenes. Kind of like it'll be like more of a musical than it is what we know it as.
Yeah. Brian, I'm gonna make him an offer he ain't refusing, baby. But that's crazy that Elvis wanted to play this role. So now that we have the casting pretty much done, we run into another issue with this film. This film is just like a train wreck in terms of trying to get done. There was a shutdown threat for the film. Coppola constantly requested for the film to be made in New York, and several real-life organized crime members did not like that. Throughout the boroughs and even Long Island. Now, the Italian-American Civil Rights League, led by the infamous Joseph Colombo, maintained that this film emphasized stereotypes about Italian Americans and wanted all the words of mafia and Cosa Nostra to be removed from the script. Now, he was protesting this. They were saying that the money that they made from this film should automatically be given to the Civil Rights League as charity, which, I wouldn't have done, but either way, I mean, I would have given it to a charity if that was the case, but not to that one, particularly because we know now what we know now. But it got to the point that even the windows of Albert Ruddy's, the producer's car, had been shot out with a note saying, basically, "Shut down the movie or
Shut them.
else." He was getting tailed, like, a lot of people were getting tailed. Um, it was looked at like, these people really do not want to may have this movie made, and they're gonna put, the screws to us, they're threatening us. But eventually, the lawyer that we talked about earlier came to the rescue. He came out, had a talk with the two gentlemen, Coppola and Colombo, and it was agreed along with Rudy that they would take out the words of La Cosa Nostra and Mafia. So that's why we never hear it in the film. They also agreed that some of the mafioso would work in the background in
Hmm.
terms of as advisors or as extras. And Corsac, basically, the lawyer, is given so much credit for this as a person who brought everyone together. The garbage men, the longshoremen, the teamsters, and the security of locations was just a call from him. So he can call and get everything set up and settled. And that eventually made it work out to start filming, which I think is crazy. I know there is a show that's out that we'll talk about later that shows the chronicles of this in more detail, but it's just a little taste of the trials and tribulation this movie went through to even get made.
That's a lot to go through, and still make it out of it with an Academy Award, type of movie.
Definitely, it's just crazy. And as we go for the score, which is the music, Coppola pushed for more of an Italian score, while the studio wanted more American style music. I don't think the studio really knew what the hell they wanted to do with this movie, but Coppola pushed and he got his way. He went too far as saying while filming the movie, "If you don't want me to do my score, then why don't you go hire Martin Scorsese?" And the studio was like, "No, no, okay, we'll do Nino Rota come in and write the score for which is the iconic Godfather theme." He used from his previous film, Fortunella, which is actually a basis of it. But that's where we have the famous Godfather theme from Nino Rota. So it's just kind of funny that Coppola made Scorsese as, "Oh, if you don't want me, go hire that guy." And Scorsese is considered one of the best directors of all time, which
Oh
is kind
yeah,
of funny.
it is.
Which just shows that Coppola did not care. He just figured, they're gonna fire me, they're gonna fire me.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of development information there. Man, what like stuck out to you the most there?
Honestly, it's the whole imagining all the different people playing different roles. I mean, Dustin Hoffman. They're saying Pacino was too short, but they wanted Dustin Hoffman, who isn't exactly tall. Just being able to make a movie, and you have at this time, the mob would probably be pretty strong coming in and having these influences that could be shutting you down. But Coppola is pretty much like, nope, full steam ahead. Honestly, from everything I look, he looks like a big guy. He doesn't look like he's afraid. And he's like, let's do it. And I think that's really, 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 what set probably this production apart, probably than every other production before it or probably after it.
Yeah, I think just that aspect of it is crazy. I think that the fact that life is imitating art with
Huh.
the organized crime ties. I mean, even Clemenza, who for those who don't know, is actually the Gabino boss, Paul Castellano. That's actually his uncle. So the one John Gotti, hit is his uncle, and I read that he actually came to the set when they were filming. So Richard Castellano, his uncle is Paul Castellano. So there's all these mob ties to this film, which I think is crazy. Uh,
Just really crazy.
don't forget to mention the Chicago Bears tie-in. Dan Barzini was played by Chris Conti's grandfather. Don Barzini. Oh, that is true.
Wow.
Yes, that is true. Don Barzini.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Did not know that. That's very cool.
That's actually something I did not know, so that's kind of good. But let's get in now to our film breakdown.
See the arc? He starts down here. He ends up here. Where's my arc, Paulie?
So let's get into this film breakdown. My man, Tone, give us the plot.
All right. So this movie, okay, pretty much, it follows the Corleone family, as transitions from its patriarch, who is played by, is Vito Corleone, to his youngest son, Michael, taking over the family. It pretty much follows the family through the trials and tribulations of drug barons aligned with other families to take out the Corleone family, as well as tragedies of family losing loved ones. Pretty much, again, it is about the mob, but then again, it's about a little bit more about life. Okay, it's about sometimes you think you're going to be one thing, and then you transition to have to be something else because of trials and tribulations. So, I mean, a lot goes into the movie, but that's the basics, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much like the best way to say it. I mean, there's a lot of organized crime stuff going on, but it's like so much more than that in terms of the film. And of course, it's a 3-hour film, so we're not going to go through every part and piece of the film to give you the basic understanding. I want everyone to experience it if they haven't seen it, the film itself. But, you know, I do love the fact that there's a lot of authentic heritage put in this film. They talk about the Godfather in terms of how Godfathers are really important in Italian, culture. In terms of, I guess, a second parent, and in Latino culture, it's the same thing. In Mexican, the padrino or Godfather is like that's your second parent. That's the person that's supposed to, like, if something happens to your parents, that's the person that's going to take care of you. When you're younger or even older, and that's like a second guidance. And that's something that I thought was kind of cool how they kept incorporating that in this film while adding how, it plays with Italian culture. And then, they have the Italian music, and it was a nice, like, different type of movie that we weren't used to at the time.
It's there were bigger movies before it, of course, but
Mhm.
I just feel like it was a step up at a different level of bigness that I had rarely seen before it. So I think it definitely set the standard, and just the plot itself. There isn't really a movie like it, I don't believe, before it. Um, but that's my opinion.
Definitely. And, the characters, Vito Corleone, we kind of touched on Marlon Brando. He was the patriarch of the family, and Brando wanted him to look like a bulldog. So he stuffed his cheeks with cotton and wool for the audition. For the actual filming, he wore a mouthpiece that was created by a dentist, and actually that appliance is actually in the American Museum of Motion Pictures in Los Angeles, which I think is
Really?
pretty
That's cool.
crazy. Yeah.
Be really
Um,
cool.
and I found this really interesting in terms of the way he portrayed his role. Brando based a lot of his performance on Al Lettieri, who plays the Turk. Uh, while preparing for the role on the waterfront, Brando became friendly with him, and basically, he found out that, again, surprise, surprise, literally had a family that was in the mob. So Brando and him will later, they will film on the go do on to do another film after on the waterfront called The Night of the Following Day, and he helped Brando prepare for this role. So Brando really trusted him with giving him his advice and whatnot, which I think is kind of great. And I think, all Alan Terry's role as the Turk is perfectly done as well. I thought he was, very cold and conniving, but also you can tell that, he's very humble in the way that his limitations in terms of the character, because he even tells Mike, like, I did my shot to try to kill Vito. You think I'm too clever. You think I'm too clever. Like, you think of me too cleverly. Like, I'm not that clever, which I thought was pretty crazy.
He played a great role,
Mhm.
Terry, and it's crazy that, I mean, rest in peace, he only passed away 3 years later of a heart attack. But in this role, it's another role that I think that you take it out or put maybe somebody different, it could alter it just a tiny bit and make the movie just not as good as it is. Not a lot of people, honestly. If you were to ask who is Ala Tateri, not a lot of people would be like, "Oh, I know him. He's somebody that you should know though, because he does a great job."
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy, like the casting. We talk about the casting, but like in terms of characters, one of the characters that's very minimal, even in the book, in terms of but in the film is Luca Brasi, and he's played by Lenny Montana. So Montana was a former professional wrestler, and he was also a Colombo enforcer.
Mhm.
Crazy thing is, when they had the meeting with Colombo to go over this agreement, Montana was there with them, with Colombo. And Coppola was so impressed by his size, he's like, "We gotta get this guy in the film."
And that was it.
Then he was cast as Luca Brasi. Uh, it's just crazy that, little things like that are added in. Um, there's also theories about the characters, being based on the gallows. Crazy Joe is basically like Sonny, a hothead. Larry was the intelligent one, like Michael, and then you had, Michael Gallo, who everybody thought was stupid, was based on Fredo. Even, though, it's not confirmed, there's a lot of similarities there, and it's kinda crazy that, like I said, life is imitating art and vice versa. Um, you know, the film itself, I think, is not it's to me, like, people say, "Oh, it's long." I don't think it's a long film. I think it's just perfectly, like, it's timed perfectly, and you can actually stop on any scene in the film that you feel is, you know, uh, in the middle of it. It's like Christmas Story. Christmas Story plays for a whole day, and I find myself, if it's on, I have to flip the channel. I see it in a certain part, I'll watch it till the next part.
Well, that's when I said I've watched it all these times. That's what it was. Is I flipped the channel on and it's on again, showtime. So wherever it's at, that's where I'm picking up at. So
Mhm.
every time I pick up at a different place, I'd see something different. It's even currently right now in the background, I have it playing and I'm looking at Duvall's hair, and I've seen something that I didn't notice all these other times seeing it, because that's what good of a movie it is you're just always going to pick up on just another little cue that you didn't know about.
Yeah, and it's crazy, just the and not just that, the film itself, the shooting of the film is a lot of people give, the lighting and film, cameraman, cinematographer, a lot of flack because they're saying, "Oh, the film was dark," people don't like the fact, George Willis thought, his shooting was very dark, but I think it adds to the scenery of the film. It's, like, sets a tone for, the underworld,
I think
um, and even though he was a menace on set in Willis, it came out to, in the long run, to work out for him. Um, it's just crazy how, like, everything perfectly fit together in this film.
the lighting is, again, I'm staring at the lighting is amazing, because as we've gotten to 4K and all this, the way they've been able to re get it to look so crisp, but
Mhm.
it feels still from back then. Even like watching it, and Abe Vigoda's in the background, and he's, and he can, it's so kind of dark, but it's not dark enough, but you can still see it's, I just think it's so cool, because these are film things that, again, after a while they become part of a wayside of film, and I think it's stuck with it, and it makes it look really cool.
Yeah, it's kinda crazy you say Abe Vigoda because Abe Vigoda actually, he for the part of Tesla, he beat out, hundreds of actors.
Really?
And yeah, and when he was cast, everybody there was like, "Oh, man, that guy's definitely, he's gotta be connected to the mob." And Abe Vigoda was not connected to the mob, which is hilarious to the fact that, like, if, you had to pick one person out, you're like, "Yeah, Abe Vigoda, that guy's gotta be connected somehow." And he wasn't even Italian, but that's the funny part about it, with Abe Vigoda. I it the characters are just cast perfectly in this film, and it's like I said, everything, all the pieces fell into place here. Even Alex Rocco, who's an Italian, was cast as Mo Green. I can't see
Oh,
anybody playing Mo Green, in terms, I was I was making my bones while
I
you were in diapers,
It's
just like
so
mhm.
watching it so like I texted you watching it so many times even today. My wife repeated that line because it's a great line. I'm Mo Green. I made my bones with cheerleaders back when you it's just like
Yeah,
great though. Again,
definitely,
excellent role, man. Excellent.
totally. But, so Tone, what are some of your iconic scenes in this film?
Okay, right off the bat, like I think of back when I first started watching this movie. Like I like to look at every movie I watch, and even there's humor in scenes that aren't maybe sometimes aren't meant to be humorous, and I think that that's kind of when you're what's the word I'm looking for when you're getting into these movies that's something to also pay attention to. So one of my favorite scenes here that I've always enjoyed, is this one right here.
No hero that cries like a woman. What can I do? What can I do?
I like that scene for many reasons. I like it, I think, for Duvall's reaction after he says it because it looks like Duvall's really laughing for like it was actually, it wasn't actually in the script. It was that he was doing it. It was a perfect scene and Duvall and Coppola caught it all. Like, and that's the thing sometimes in those scenes, you don't get the catching of that final laugh or you do catch it and you cut it to keep it in there and keep it that strong. I think it's perfect. It's to me and my buddies we would always
Yeah.
quote that.
You can act like a man, right, beef, yeah, that's, like, one of the hilarious parts. That whole wedding scene to me is, very interesting and, like, probably one of my favorite parts of the movie because, you know, James Caan when he goes after the FBI's camera and smashes the shit out of it, that was improvised to the point where if you like, I watched it yesterday just to see the guy was scared shitless, you know what James Caan did, and the fact he takes money out and throws it,
Oh,
that's like that was improvised as well, and Caan, again, being with the underground, bad end element and getting inspiration from those people really in that life, like Carmine Persico, who was his boy, you know, if you haven't known Carmine Persico, look him up, the snake. He was one of the leaders in the mob, and that was James Caan's boy, so he was hanging out with him to the point where even when he said the, bada bing, boom, that's a Carmine Persico line that Caan stole from him. You know, the wedding part where they had all the extras, Coppola wanted this wedding to be authentic, so he told them, "Hey, everybody that's in this scene, improvise." So that's all improvisation, and that goes into, like, one of my favorite parts, and I'll play you a clip from it, which goes on with the wedding.
Michael? That man over there is talking to himself. See that scary guy over there?
He's a very scary guy.
Well, who is he? What's his name?
His name is Luca Brasi. He helps my father out sometimes.
The role with, Luca Brasi sitting there saying, "Don Corleone, I'm very happy you invited," and that was actually authentically him practicing. Now, in the role where he meets, Marlon Brando and he messes up his lines and you could tell he's struggling, that was authentic. That's actually what happened, and Coppola loved that cut to the point that he actually had that scene of him outside practicing film to go along with it. And that's just awesome. That's just like, to me, that's magic because
it
it always cracked me up that this big burly, mofo is, like, so nervous to meet the Don, and he played it perfectly.
great scene. Started laughing as soon as you played it because I see him sitting there and it's again as you said catching that
Mhm.
it's magical. Back somebody mentioned it earlier, but back to the actual wedding itself. My It was my mom's grandma.
Mm.
They were from Italy, moved to Chicago in like the 1940s, didn't speak English. In the 19 when this movie comes out, my mom's with her grandma and no English. But when this part comes on, my mom says she lights up like a candle because she said it was and this is from somebody from Italy. It was a fair representation of exactly what a wedding would be like if you went to an Italian wedding. And this was somebody from Italy. So I remember my mom telling me this, like when I was like in 7th or 8th grade, that it wasn't even like, they filmed it, that's how real the whole entire thing was, is that even the wedding was that it was authentic down to the bone, the movie.
Yeah, and just to go back to a comment we had earlier, Lucky Spag says, "Funny thing is, most weddings and holidays are just like they did in The Godfather. We always play the same music." And our guy, the Beef Loaf, says, "Sonny had quite a wedding. Destroyed the camera, then was banging a bridesmaid. What a day." Definitely. That part always cracked me up too. Is I find it hilarious how when Tom Hagen goes to knock on the door
Uh-huh.
and he hears what's going on and he does a little smirk and
And
then walks
smirk
away.
again. Oh yeah.
Walks away. Yeah, it's this, like I said, the film was cast perfectly. Another scene I really love is the head in the bed, which is basically the head of the horse that is in the director's bed that refused to give Johnny Fontaine the role, the studio executive.
I'm not made to look ridiculous.
Yes.
That guy's the best. That
Yeah,
guy's great.
definitely. And his personality was based on MGM head Louis B. Mayer, who same thing, obsessed with racing, and he owned a racing stable, and he would abandon the activity because of his son-in-law. Got into the stable and apparently fixed the race. But the crazy thing about this is not only the slow camera movement that opens the film, which starts off with the close of the guy's face, and they pan back, which is something that was not really done. But in the terms of the horse's head, that was actually a real fucking horse's head that they got from the dog food factory, which I thought was crazy. During rehearsals, a false horse's head was used for the bedroom scene, but when it was really shot, a real one was used, acquired from the dog food factory. According to John Marley, who played the role of Jack Waltz, his scream was real in horror, as he was not informed that there would be a real fucking horse's head in there. And then, of course, all the animal activists and all these rights came out and said, they protested that there's a horse's head. And Francis Ford Coppola, in typical Francis Ford Coppola, said, there were many people killed in this film, but everyone worries about the horse, which I thought was hilarious.
That's a good line.
And that is like very, that how many times has that been parodied? The horse's head, The Simpsons, other movies, the horse's head just in there. It's just crazy how that was done. Do you have any other scenes that were iconic to you?
One of my favorites. I mean, Fredo is in general, just him as in general on screen. It just, to me, I wish that there is no complaints, because I find it to be a perfect movie. If there was, I wish just a little bit more, maybe 5 more minutes of John Cazale in the movie, because, I think he gets the less screen time on anybody. But to me, a scene that I really enjoy is when he juggles that gun and messes up the whole entire thing with Vito out there, because it shows you just really how weak he was, because Vito's getting shot. He gets out of the car. He's going to try to make a move to shoot somebody, and he totally fumbles the gun, and it goes onto the ground. And it just really, again, shows you. And then he drops by his dad and cries. And it again shows you that it's a great acting scene, because, again, he wants to be this person, but and that's the whole movie. He wants to be somebody in this family that can compete like everybody else. He just can't.
Yeah, but he went to Vegas to learn the gambling business. But to go along with what Lucky Spag says, a fish head and black roses was given to a family was a sign, and there is a lot of symbolism in this movie. One of the famous lines is Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes, which is something that was actually taken from some Sicilian mafiosos that they have done research on. But not just that, I'm gonna give you something that's gonna make you look at The Godfather differently when you watch it next time. Every time somebody has an orange by them, that character is going to die.
Ooh.
If you look at the scene where they have, the iconic meeting of the commission where Sonny had just been killed, they're sitting and they're talking, and Don Corleone is talking to, basically introducing all the family's heads of the family. You see an orange placed by Barzini. You see an orange placed by the other people they kill. And to go even further with that, When the Don gets shot, what's he buying?
Orange.
He's buying orange. When he dies, what's in his mouth?
And orange.
So the orange was used as a symbol of death, which I thought was pretty crazy and something I didn't really realize until,
Yeah.
later. Um, Another like scene with oranges, Paulie gives Clemenza wine with oranges floating in it,
That's
hence
true.
showing that Paulie is going to die eventually. It's pretty crazy how that symbolism is something that I didn't know about, and it
I
was
didn't
nice.
either.
It was nice to find out, and next time you watch it, just check out the scene. You'll see like, damn, yeah, everybody who has an orange dies or gets hurt in some way. Uh, of course, the shooting of Sollozzo, the Turk, was another iconic scene. I always love the part when Clemenza asks Mike when they're preparing for what he's gonna do. He's like, "So you shoot him, and what do you do?" He's like, "I sit down and finish my meal." He's like, "No, seriously, don't mess around." That the fact that role, well, that whole scene was perfectly done, especially in a real snowstorm in an abandoned building that they turned into look like a restaurant. Al Pacino wore a foam latex facial appliance that covered the whole left side of his cheek because it was broken, apparently, by Captain McCluskey. It's just it was
It's
really
crazy
done very
because
well.
as you're saying this right now,
Mhm.
this is exactly the scene that's on in the background here.
Yeah.
And Pacino, in the movie, the first scene you just played a little while ago where he's at the wedding, it's like his mood just as the minutes go in the movie, he just gets more and more like darker than the person he was at that wedding, which I like that because it's again his character just is changing every time he's on the screen pretty much.
Yeah. And I love that scene. It's just
It's great.
and it still holds up to today, the shots, it's still done
Well,
very well in terms of effects.
and not guns, of course, but I still go in bathrooms and look and see if like, oh, somebody put something somewhere, because it's such a cool move too, because it's 19, in the 50s actually, because
Mhm.
that's when they're setting it. Nobody would ever have thought that someone would get into that restaurant to hide it there. So it was a great move, as far as the plot went. I thought it was great.
Definitely. I mean, this film has, like, a lot of, like, little trivia and tail bits, little tidbits that make it what it is today. The iconic scene where the Don I mean, this has been painted, this has been taken pictures of, where Corleone is stroking the cat, petting the cat. That was a stray that Brando found behind the studio and was like, "I'm gonna have this," and it was purring, so they decided to shoot it. Just randomly, some random cat came and Marlon Brando decided to stroke it, and then now it's iconic as the Don with his cat, which is, another thing that when we think of, like, the movie Mafioso, Boss, we think of Don Corleone, which shows how iconic the character is. Uh, the scenes between Carlo and Connie, they were basically filmed to show parts of the book that were influential into the demise of Sonny, but also the fights were shown more graphically because Robert Evans and the studio at Paramount wanted more action in the film.
Mm.
They wanted more action to ramp it up, so Coppola obliged and filmed that to the point where there's a part where she's throwing the vases and the glasses and dishes down that she loses a shoe and she's running away, and she worried her through it even though she coulda cut her foot pretty bad on the glass that was on the floor, which I thought was pretty crazy. A scene that always sticks out to me, and I love this movie, but this is by far one of the worst fight scenes I've ever seen in my life, and that's the fight between Sonny and Carlo.
That's a bad one. Well,
Yeah.
then it's bad because I don't know really sometimes what's going on in the actual fight. Like he's like trying to hit him. He throws the stick. I don't know.
Yeah.
What
He
were
throws the
you?
stick, he
Yeah.
does the punch. When he punches him in the stomach, he punches him in the face, and it's a total miss, and you can totally see his face just go to the side. It's funny, that's why it's so bad, it's funny to me, and you can see James Caan is, like, so winded, he's beating the shit out of him. He's like, "Don't tell me to touch my sister, I'll kill you." But, this is a great little tidbit that, Brian brought up saying that to practice that shot, that we just talked about with Talia Shire, her son was chasing her around the house with a knife.
Interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting.
And there's another thing too, sound editing in that part was done pretty badly for the Carlo Sonny role fight, you know. Another iconic scene, I know we're bouncing all over the place, but there's just so many good scenes in this, is the shooting of Sonny. When he hears about the call and then, you know, from Connie, and he runs off and gets pissed and runs through the expressway, and they do the famous dropping of the coin, and he gets shot up, which I think is pretty crazy. That scene actually had to be done in one take with different cameras positioned for each shot. This was basically done with the 149 squibs taped to James Caan. So his body can simulate the effect of rapid machine gun fire. And they couldn't shoot that after that one take. It's pretty crazy how that it's done. Also, if you want to give another little tidbit and hint, you can tell Carlo is behind that hit because when Sonny is shot and laying on the floor after the last guy puts a couple more shots into him, he kicks him in the face. Something Sonny did to Carlo when he beat the shit out of him earlier in the film.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So, like another iconic, you know, Mo Green in Vegas. This is Vegas. You know, Johnny Fontaine comes back to revive his career, and then, you know, he's signed to appear in Michael's casinos as they try to go legit. And we all know that Mo Green was modeled after Bugsy Siegel. Although he wasn't known for wearing glasses, he was assassinated the same way with the Mo Green special through the eye, which I thought was kind of funny.
That was.
You know, the shooting of the 5 families. That's another iconic scene of the baptism. And the funny thing about this was, I always remember, like, even as a kid, I'm like, man, Clemenza was sweating like crazy and he was running up those stairs.
It was.
And then doing a deep dive into, you know, why, it turns out that Castellano defended George Willis, the cinematographer, from an argument with Coppola. And Coppola was pissed. So Coppola's like, all right, you want to defend him, you're going to run up and down these stairs. So he made him do 20 takes of him running up 4 flights of stairs.
Oh, geez.
So, like, it came out that Castellano was like, you know, literally, you know, laboring and sweating. That was really him sweating and laboring for the fact that that happened, which I thought was pretty hilarious, that Coppola was petty enough to do that to one of his own actors.
But hey, honestly, in my rewatch, that scene, I don't know why it's been sticking with me, him running up those stairs, but it's a good scene because it makes it seem like he's the one who's going to be the one who's going to fall down the stairs, not he's the one who's taking somebody. It's a good scene. I like it.
Definitely. And Castellano wanted $5 million for a sequel. No one, yeah. That if we do the sequel, The Godfather 2, I'll get into a little more. His story is pretty crazy for the sequel. But to encapsulate all these scenes, the behind the scenes stuff is pretty funny that I read about. There was a shitload of mooning going on.
Really?
And yes, it was started by James Caan and Robert Duvall in an effort to break some tension while they were rehearsing. They would do it, and it got to the point where even Marlon Brando was doing it, which I thought was hilarious. Michael Al Pacino even got into the act when there's a scene when he's filmed sitting at his father's desk after Vito has passed and he takes over. He's sitting there. He wasn't wearing any pants. And when the shot was over, he stood up and basically mooned everybody. And everybody's like, what the hell? Just because Al wanted to get on the act. Well, they declared Marlon Brando as the moon champion for being a prankster, which I thought was pretty funny. And that's kind of funny. You seeing all these iconic characters, and then the funny thing in the background is that they're mooning people. But there's just so many, you know, great scenes in this film that tie everything together. You know, we pretty much went over a lot of them, and then there's some iconic dialogue, you know, like this.
Fredo, you're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
Or even it all coming together with this line.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
And that's something I really liked about that, because I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. And that line is uttered throughout all 3 films in some way. But the fact that this movie is about a transitioning from a patriarch to the younger son. If you notice, Michael says that line about Mo Green when he goes to Vegas. I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse after Fredo tells him, I didn't know Mo Green was selling. He never told me. And he's like, mhm.
I love right before, Michael said the line that you said right before that, when Fredo's like, you don't come to Las Vegas and you don't talk to a man like Mo Green. Or right before that, when Fredo actually comes in the room and he's like pretending like he's the conductor to the orchestra, and just Pacino's face is like almost like, oh my gosh, he's just like a circus monkey, because he's like,
Yeah.
like, it's great. It's great.
Mo loves the business. He never said nothing to me about selling. Yeah, well, I'll make him an offer he can't refuse.
Yeah, just that whole
Great.
line there, And then, Spags brings up another good thing, the bloopers. There is a bunch of bloopers in here. One of the most famous ones is when the hospital scene, which we didn't talk about, Enzo, who was the Italian that was actually saved by Don Corleone, by the baker. He's actually the baker's son-in-law, future son-in-law. When he goes to the hospital to protect Don Corleone, which I think is an awesome scene before Mikulski breaks Michael's jaw. When the Don comes home and they carry him up the stairs, Marlon Brando put extra weights in his bed. So it would be extra heavy for them to carry him up, so which I think was hilarious. So if you look at you can see they're kind of struggling a little bit when they pick him up the stairs, and I thought that was kind of funny how that was one of the pranks they did. But yeah, Beef, definitely. Enzo had a big ball standing out there with Michael with no gun or nothing. And the crazy thing is, differences with this is Enzo is actually was in the military in the book. So I love the way they made him in the movie, like as a minor character, but in the book he was a former soldier. But I love how Coppola just kind of disregarded that and made it to where he was so nervous that he couldn't light the cigarette. On top of that, the trip to Italy, Apollonia, not particularly the best parts of the movie, but the fact that Michael got married before Kay, and she was a victim of
That was what I was going to tell you too. Is like I don't, even though it's not the best part of the movie, I think it's a part of the movie that makes the movie what it is, because again, it gives it a chance to step away from like the American scene, and then as maybe this is where Sergio Leone would have been more like, in this scene, because you get to use that Italian landscape.
Yeah, and they also show Don Vito's his buddy, his friend, the other Don that goes out there and protects Michael, and then they elaborate on that in the future. Like another great line, Brian. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday. I know English. That and the part, just the part where the car blows up, you're like, holy shit! Like it just explodes, and it's just crazy.
You mean when Michael flies in the bushes? Like when what's it like that? That was like that part.
Yeah, but just the part where he's like, Apollonia, boom. I'm like, damn. I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, damn. They did it like that because I didn't read the book at first, and it's just crazy how they got him. But yeah, like I said, everything in this movie is iconic from the scenes, and we can do a whole 2 hours just on the movie itself, breaking down each and every point. But we just wanted to highlight the movie's plot and go into some iconic scenes that we like. But what about this one?
You can act like a man! What's the matter with you? Is this how you turn down a Hollywood Pinocchio that cries like a woman? What can I do? What can I do? What is it?
And who can forget this iconic line? And I'm pretty sure my brother-in-law would not forgive me if I didn't include this one.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
Which was totally improvised by Castellano, which I think is hilarious. Hey, pull over here. I gotta take a leak. And just the whole lead up to it, yeah.
That's a great scene. Just the way it's filmed. the way it's all bristling like as he's pissing or whatever, right? Oh, it's in the background. It's just that's a great scene too.
So the crazy part about that scene was that scene's actually shot in stock footage
Hmm.
because they're going through old school New York.
Yeah,
What
okay.
they did was they found the same model type car and just used a duplicate license plate. So when he drives
Ooh,
onto the actual highway, that's actually them. But when they're driving, that's actually stock footage, which I thought was pretty crazy reading that.
very cool.
And to movie magic, my man, movie magic.
Very, very magic.
Exterminate. That's a bad word to use. But we basically broke down the film. Now let's get into some critical reception and fan theories.
You know that fat cocksucker says I look like the Shah of Iran?
Who does? Tony. I never got that at all.
The Godfather was nominated for 7 Oscars, winning 3. Marlon Brando for Best Actor, Best Director Francis Ford Coppola, and Best Adapted Screenplay won by both Puzo and Coppola. The Godfather grossed over $250 million worldwide on a $6 million budget. This film has been called a masterpiece of cinema, and it ranks on many American Film Institute top lists and is the #1 mafia film of all time. Some even consider it the greatest film of all time. It's got such a cultural and critical reception positively that real life gangsters responded enthusiastically to the film. Sammy the Bull Gravano is quoted as saying that I left the movie stunned. I mean, I floated out of the theater. Maybe it was fiction, but for me, then that was our life. It was incredible. I remember talking to a multitude of made guys who felt the exact same way. Close quote. And according to Anthony Flauto, who's also a member of the mafia, patriarchal family members such as Paulie Istano and Nicky Gisso, who talked with very horrible English and horrible regular English, like broken English, and used bad grammar. When they saw this film and saw how well kept and well uh, able to express themselves verbally, the characters did, they basically started to articulate everything and change the way they talked, which I thought was pretty crazy.
That is.
Another crazy thing about this film is that Al Pacino and Diane Keaton thought this film was going to bomb. The reason being was he saw Coppola crying at the funeral the funeral landmark for Marlon Brando when they had the tombstone. He went to his trailer and he saw him bawling, and it was just basically all the pressure that was coming over Coppola for the film. And that's when Pacino was like, I don't think this movie's going to do well. This guy's kind of like on his last end. And it's crazy because, like I said, the film is considered one of the best of all time. So what do you think about the film, Tony?
Oh, I think it's a work of art. I mean, from just the way it looks to all the performances. I mean, all of these actors in this movie, this is where I got my start watching Pacino. This is where I got my start watching Duvall and Khan and Brando, and I branched out to all of their other movies because of this movie. So the movie itself is not only inspirational, but the performances themselves have stuck with me. Mentioned very beginning of the chat was again John Cazale only being in 5 movies, and this being his first one. I deem it to be pretty important. I just think the scenes are great, the acting is great. It's a great movie.
5 films in a row that were nominated for best film of the year.
And he's great in all 5.
Yes, extremely. And Pacino has come out and said that he was very underrated. Which
to think of just, and I do this a lot with the what if could have beens, the roles that are left on the table, and I'm glad though he was able to get this role because again, Coppola doesn't go see him in that play. Is he in this movie? Is he ever in any of those other 4 movies? Do we ever even get to see him? That's how cool it is. Timing and fate and some of this stuff is that you just happen to be at the right place at the right time, or he meets this and gonna go see him. It's really cool.
This is funny. Everybody thought Everybody thought Coppola was washed. Then he made Jack and bam, vindicated. That's funny.
Jack.
And Jack says, I used to deliver the mail in Cicero. There was a social club on 19th Street, and they show the Godfather movies once a month, and the place would be crazy crowded on those afternoons. Yes, that's true, Jack. It still holds up to this day in terms of cultural influence. It's mentioned in songs, it's parodied in TV shows. You know, Hey Arnold, the Nickelodeon show, did the part with the horse and the head. Like I said, I touched on The Simpsons. It was made into a video game on Xbox, which is actually really well done as you play a character who's behind the scenes of like when Luca Brasi gets killed. That character is actually looking through the window, seeing him get killed, and then goes and tells Michael. Goes and tells Sonny. He's the one that delivers the package to them about the Luca Brasi sleeps with fishes. It's just stuff like that is kind of crazy that it's built onto its own little universe of acceptance, and it's iconic. And there's not many films that can honestly say that. Like,
Mhm.
one thing that is crazy to me are the fan theories about this film. I'm gonna go through a couple of them here, and I wanna know what you think. One of the fan theories that came out was that, Tom had Luca Brasi killed. So this is according to a Reddit user. It wasn't Salasso who killed Luca, but Tom. They believe that the scenes were told in non-chronological order, stating, "I think the sequence was kidnap Tom, gun down the Godfather, interrogate Tom. Tom gives up Luca. Luca goes to the club and gets choked." What do you think about that?
It's interesting. That one I haven't really thought about too much, but I mean, I've always just thought of Tom as, a non-war consigliere or whatever, and that's, and I don't know, but it that could the way it's said. I like thinking of movies like that, like there was something secret in there that it wasn't non-linear, and maybe it could be, but I haven't put too much thought into that one.
Yeah, that one's kind of,
I
out
know.
there.
Yeah.
There's another one, Sonny survived. Sonny's death is probably one of the most rewatched scenes from the entire trilogy. It serves as a brutal cap to this character's arc, and it proves one of the film's most violent sequences. It's pretty obvious that he does not survive, but according to user Sicilian Family from Reddit, he thinks he did. As they state, Vito Corleone is looking at Sonny's body double when identifying the body at the funeral parlor. Of course, the primary response claims this is the worst theory I've ever seen on this sub, which I think is hilarious because that one is completely washed out because Vito says, "Look what they did to my boy."
I know, and
So
and I even got a book here. It's on the shelf
Mhm.
over there. It's like the most violent scenes in movie history, and that's like the one they picked from The Godfather. So, not to say it would just be really cheesy if he survived that, and then the kick in the head at the end too. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know, I don't know.
it's strange. But here's a good one. This is the one that actually I thought was very good. Michael was effective due to his military training. It is made abundantly clear throughout The Godfather that Michael has a military background, and according to a Reddit user, this background was invaluable in his rapid accession to the top. As they write the headline, Marco Corleone effectiveness and superiority over other crime families from his U.S. military training what no other mafioso of his time had. And they concluded that he was so successful the reason he was so successful is that he turned the Corleone family into practically a war machine. He was operating his family as a company of the U.S. Army in peacetime.
I was like, wow, where's this going? And then all of a sudden, that last part, I don't know, that one's really that
That's
was
actually
actually this
it can make sense.
it could. It's the U.S. The operating family as a company of the U.S. Army in peacetime. That
Yeah,
was the thing
that
where
part
but
was like
everything else before that, I could see all of that. I
definitely,
could see
definitely.
definitely all of that.
And to finish this theory's up. Let's go with the most ridiculous one I heard besides Sonny being alive. So this theory is saying that Elf, Will Ferrell and James Caan, and Good Burger are in the same universe as The Godfather.
Wow, this is gonna be a good one.
So one of the movie's most bizarre fan theories by user Speedboat26, love the name, claims that The Godfather shares a cinematic universe with Elf. They believe that Sonny faked his death to leave the mafia, changed his name to Walter Hobbs, met Susan Wells, and had Buddy the Elf. Walter's rough, take no nonsense persona comes from his time in the mafia and is more peaceful remnant of Sonny's violent temper. Furthermore, Walter's son is named Michael, having obviously named him after his long lost brother, Michael Corleone. And then, according to user Confused Moon 2002, The Godfather shares a cinematic universe with a 1997 comedy film, Good Burger, which itself was inspired by the All That sketch starring Kel Mitchell and Keenan Thompson. The theory states that it wades through some deep territory. Thankfully, he says, in 1955, Ava Goda's character, gangster Salvador Tesso, escapes execution in New York and flees California. He takes a mild-mannered job at a restaurant under the pseudonym Otis, and 42 years later, the events of Good Burger happen.
Oh, okay.
And that makes me look at Good Burger differently because there's a part where he says, "Oh, this is Otis. He's on fries and he has the oxygen mask, and he takes it off and he goes, I should have died years ago," which I guess I mean, if his theory is correct, yeah, I guess he should have. But
I like the one before that one, the elf one. That one,
yeah.
I love doing that with movies, with actors. I do it all the time when I'm sitting on the couch with Katie.
Degree of separation.
Yeah, what if this guy was actually the father of of Kurt, and this and that. That's fun, but
definitely, it's crazy. But in terms of The Godfather, the canon is basically The Godfather and The Godfather trilogy. Additionally, there's some information that supplements the disc of DVD and Blu-ray, and the final screenplays of the drafts of the film, which I think is pretty crazy because we mentioned Tesso. In Tesso, in The Godfather Returns, they actually give, which is a book, they give the actual execution of Tesso. So Tesso, they tell about what happens to when he dies, which I thought was pretty crazy. And then there's the other books, The Sicilian, The Family Corleone, which is based on the original screenplay by Marco Puzo. So if you want to get some more Godfather stuff, you can check out those things. There's also deleted scenes, like when Sonny was in charge. After the down is shot, he delivers the news to his mom and then eventually calls, Tesso to send 50 good men to the house. He's kind of happy and sad. One thing that was a payoff that was in the deleted scenes in the book was the death of Fabrizio. So Fabrizio killed Apollonia by setting a bomb in the car when it exploded when she started up the car. And in the book, Michael tracks him down, and the bodyguard that set him up, he kills him. There's a part where it shows him ordering, and there's a scene that shows Michael recovering and ordering his men to find his former bodyguard. Coppola also filmed a scene in which Michael is tuning a Lupara, just like Fabrizio, confronts him and blows him away. There's actually shots of this on the internet if you look for it, like the stills. But it was so bloody that it was cut. And then there's one where they actually blow him up in a car. I've seen that clip, have you? Where he's actually walking out of his pizzeria and he gets into his car and it blows up.
Yes, I have. Yes.
Brian says it's in the miniseries. So I haven't seen the miniseries, but definitely we should. If you have, I definitely will check that out.
Yeah.
But that's basically all the fan theories and critical reception of The Godfather. I have been reading the book. The book does have some differences from the film, although there are a lot of similarities. There's a big thing with Sonny and the maid of honor, Sonny's endowment. I did find that the book, when it describes the characters as Michael Corleone, it does describe him as good looking, but in terms of the character Connie, it describes her as ugly. It describes Fredo as tubby. It's just crazy. The miniseries has a bunch of deleted stuff. The end has Kane in church lighting candles for Michael Sins. I might have to check this out.
Is the miniseries, is he talking about the one where it's all in order?
I'm not sure.
Okay, because I know they had done where they put it all in like chronological order from like when Vito's younger and then all of
check
that.
It all comes back to Sinbad. Yeah, he said yeah. He said yeah. Okay. I definitely have to check that out. But that, my friends, is our Godfather breakdown.
Amazing. That was amazing.
So I knew I threw a lot of information. We threw a lot of information at you for the past hour or so. I try to make it as thorough and as entertaining as possible
You
to
did.
to make sure that we got that information out there. But if you guys have not watched this movie, I highly recommend it. Highly recommend you watching it. And oh my god, yeah. So shout out to if you guys are seeing more interaction from the After Show podcast Twitter. That's my man Tony doing all that. So shout out to
Thank
him.
you.
But this part of The Godfather 3 where Michael screams for his daughter's death.
No.
Yes. It's probably one of the most hilarious parts to me. But I love the fact that when you put that poll out, like which Godfather film,
Oh yeah.
somebody voted for the third one, and my brother-in-law commented, "Whoever voted for the third movie should never be allowed to vote again."
And that was a very, very valid point. The one little thing that I will say is I think it was the last year or two, they put out that new version of it. It was called like it's the Corleone. So it's like
The Death of Michael Corleone.
yeah, like they reformatted it and all, and it's better. Of course, it's not as anywhere near as good as the other two. And this scene is always ridiculous, no matter where you place it in the movie. But it's worth the check out.
Yes.
Sophia's bad. Sophia's really bad.
And the funny thing is, she's actually in the original Sofia Coppola. She's the baby that gets baptized.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So that's pretty crazy. But we do have 2 more segments. The first, my friend, being what's coming soon.
All right.
Let's get ready to rumble.
Coming soon.
Próximamente.
Coming soon.
Coming soon.
So, Tone, tell us what's coming next, my man.
Up next, we've got a classic, an amazing movie, my friends. It's John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China. And if I can say this enough, this is probably the movie that brought me and my man Yumper together. So this is really going to be a good one to really dig into and have a good time. It's just one of my favorites, man. What do you got to say?
I'm totally pumped about it, man. I wanted to do more deep dives into individual films. We will go back to having the list that we've had before, but I kind of wanted to do a more like fixated film deep dive. And The Godfather was at the top of my list. And I know when you brought this film up, I was down to do it because this is probably one of my favorite films of all time.
So many good quotes. So many good quotes.
Also, the next show will have some special segments. So we have some special segments planned that will be alternating as we go. And we are now weekly, ladies and gents. We are going every Friday until something comes up and we can't. So we will be every Friday at 8:00. You can come check us out on the Sadistic Penguin Studios YouTube to get your good movie fix in. So really looking forward to this one.
It's going to be awesome. It's going to be really good. We're, like I said, this is awesome. Friday nights are going to be a good time talking flicks.
For sure, my man, for sure. So if you guys don't know, my man, Tony, aka Chowza, aka the Sugar Baggy, does the hookup on music for the Sadistic Penguin Studios channel and website. And he does an excellent job. He just dropped out a great the movie The Kid. Yes. He just did a great job of doing a breakdown of the great albums of 2023. So I highly recommend you check that out. We had a fellow Penguin Roxy on there, an Ask crew member, discussing their favorite albums from 2023. Just a great discussion and breakdown of that. So we have a new segment that's going to close out our show, and that is the Sugar Baggies Pick of the Week.
The Sugar Baggies Soundtrack Pick of the Week.
So tonight's pick of the week, I try not to overthink this one too much. I had to go with what really came to my head, the first one. And I was also trying to think of the Godfather and mob movies and what do we have and this and that. So what I've come up with here, I'm going to play you the clip and then we're going to just talk about it here really quick. Here is the clip that I picked. That is a song called Jump Into the Fire by Nielsen, and that appears in Goodfellas. That song I probably never would have heard of until I've seen Goodfellas, like in 7th grade. But now that song, I could listen to that song a million times. And of course, you want to see helicopters, I'll show you helicopters, all the quotes and that whole entire part. But the movie itself, just again, Scorsese putting on good tracks, but I think that one is a little bit of a deeper cut. And if you have not heard it, please do. An excellent drum breakdown. But that's just a little bit to get started here in what we're doing. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in and always checking out what we're doing here. So thank you very much.
For sure. That's a great soundtrack, not just on that, Layla's on there.
Oh, yeah.
Sunshine of Your Love, Stardust, Look Into My Eyes, I think is another one.
That whole Layla coda, just the piano outro in the movie, of course, like at the end, I know another movie that you love, another Scorsese one really quick is like Casino, and I want, Devo's use of Whip It in that movie is great too.
Definitely. Scorsese films have really good soundtracks.
They do. Even really quick, if you happen to check out the new Killers of the Flower Moon, the soundtrack on that is really good and it fits what they're doing. So, I mean, always good stuff in the Scorsese soundtracks, but check out Jump in the Fire by Nielsen.
Awesome. Check that out. So that's our show. Check us out on the Twitters at the show pod. You can check us out at our website, sadisticpenguinstudios.com, where we'll have our blogs. We have collections coming out. Tony has the Hookup on Music coming out. Brian has It's Getting Drafty in there, which is kind of ironic because Brian, hey, shout out to you. You uploaded your last episode, which I think is awesome and great. That's our inside joke. We also have blogs from Comic Punk Guy, who's doing a great job reviewing movies. And we have Roxy's Nonsense on there as well. So be sure to check us out there. And with that, my friends, you guys have a good night.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the At the Show podcast, a Sadistic Penguin Studios production.
Game over, man. It's game over. What the fuck are we gonna do now? What are we gonna do?
Maybe we could build a fire, sing a couple of songs, huh? Why don't we try that?